Hey, you guys, Dev here at WeBuyHouses.com. Welcome to the Cash Offer Masterclass. It's episode number 90. And you guys know every 10th episode we do a special educational presentation. Those are all compiled in a playlist on our channel called Real Estate Investor Training. So check that out if you want to kind of watch all the 10th episodes and get the kind of educational presentation. It basically creates a class if you watch that playlist from top to bottom. And so today I wanted to talk to you about this subject. Whoop, am I in the way? The perils of creative financing. And what I really wanted to answer was this question of whether new investors, should be trying these unusual strategies, when they are, pretty new to the business. Because I noticed that there's a lot of training on the internet and, kind of the info marketing type of stuff that pitches these creative ideas, such as subject-to and novation agreements. And I think those are perfectly legitimate ways to buy real estate, but they're not the usual way that we do it. They're kind of unusual. And so, would you really want to start there, as far as learning the business and trying to find the deals? And so, that's one of the things I just wanted to talk to you guys about today. I don't have anything against subject-to or novation, but I think that's just not the starting point. If you look at the type of transactions that we typically have, it's either the cash purchase for someone who's going to buy, fix, and flip, or buy, fix, and hold, or it's wholesaling, which is basically doing the front of that process, doing the buying, going and marketing, finding the motivated seller, getting the property under contract, and then flipping that contract. And to me, both of those are legitimate ways to do this business. And generally, new investors, they might start wholesaling first to, basically make some money. It's more like a job, in my opinion. And then, move to ultimately doing cash purchases, perhaps using hard money and that kind of thing. So, in fact, I know a lot of the people that do cash purchases are not actually often using their own money, but they know what they're doing, they've done it, they've proven their model, and so people are willing to loan them money so that they can go do it. So those to me are the traditional ways that we do this. The subject-to is buying a property subject to their existing financing. So in other words, I'll buy your property, you give me the property, I'll give you some money, I'll take over the loan. And then, the nice thing about that is I don't have to come up with that amount of money that was in that loan. And if the loan's, a low interest rate, that's pretty attractive. Novation agreement is kind of a creative, like, well, if you don't like my cash deal, I could do this. And what I would do is I would do a contract with you, and then I'd go market your property and find a buyer that could pay more, and then we'll kind of split the difference and I'll make some money. And it sounds to me kind of like brokerage, but I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. But subject-to, how do they work? I'm not gonna labor this, but I just want to make a few points here, and I think in order to do so, we should have a foundation for what these things are. I know people that have done hundreds of subject-to deals. So, and I've done a few of them. I was never I never found that many people that wanted to do it, and I think that's kind of the issue. And I'll talk about that in a second. But in a subject-to deal, basically the seller transfers title control to the investor. It's generally not that they're just giving the investor the house. What we would typically do is like a land trust for the property, and then the sellers would become the beneficiaries of the land trust, and I would be the executor. And that's kind of how we took control. You need to, as an investor, take control if you're going to take over that loan, and start making payments on it. You don't want them to just be able to walk away after you maybe gave them some money and then you got their loan current and all that stuff. And I'm going to break that down in just a minute, but you do need control, and so it is that's one of the things that you have to explain to the homeowner is we're going to do this thing with the title. Um, I don't think you're going to convince them to actually transfer title to you. I wouldn't do that. But if you say, hey, we're going to create a trust, you're the beneficiaries of the trust, I'm going to be the executor, that will allow me to take over your mortgage and act on your behalf. And that is true. And so that's the structure I would use. Now, my point here is that that's a little complicated. Now you're creating trust and that kind of thing. But and you're doing title work with the county, and with your trust documents, and it's not it's not like it's brain surgery, but it is more steps to the process than kind of is usual. It's an unusual process, is what I'm trying to say. Well, basically, the investor in this scenario doesn't have to get financing for that big chunk. And then we, as the investors, control the exit strategy, which we could rent it, lease option, refinance it, wrap it, resell the property while keeping the original loan in place. The ones that I always did, we just basically were flipping, and so we used their loan during the the rehab process. Basically, we were paying the loan during that. We generally did not keep houses that had other existing mortgages in place. We generally sold them, and then that paid off the existing mortgage. That's kind of a very clean way to do subject to, but like I know a lot of guys that ended up using the existing mortgage for a number of years with a renter in the property, and they cash flowed it. And it's a great strategy. So profit comes from equity and cash flow. Yeah, in fact, if you rent it, you generally hope to see some appreciation over the rental period, and then at the end, the loan's been paid down, and you made rental income, and so it's a good deal. I like Subject-To. Nothing against them. Who's a good fit for the Subject-To as far as sellers? Well, they don't have a lot of equity, but they usually have a little bit of equity, and so you can just offer to give them that equity right now, and then they can walk off. They're generally behind on their payments, and often in the early stages, or sometimes even latter stages of foreclosure. That's what I think. This is where I think reality is a little different than the training. Like the Pace Morby, and I have nothing against Pace Morby, by the way. I like the guy, very compelling character. But I remember seeing him explain how he had gone to talk to a seller who wanted cash for their house, and he ends up walking out of the house with walking out with the house, her loan. He didn't put any money into the deal, and the way he did it is he offered her more than she wanted, but if she would give him the loan and let him pay her also the down payment and all that kind of stuff out over time. And that is not what I've seen. What I've seen is most of these deals, they're behind on payments. And the reason they would do a Subject-To is, why not? They're going to lose the house and are going to have a foreclosure on their record if they don't do the Subject-To. So these are the people that you're looking for. And so just be aware, this is basically foreclosure, buying people homes from people who are in foreclosure, and they don't have a lot of equity. They do have a good rate generally, and their balance is reasonable. And so that's it. And the last thing, they're comfortable leaving the loan in their name. It's funny because you'd think that's a hard thing to explain to people or to get them to do. And it goes back to the second bullet. If you're facing foreclosure, what does it matter? I mean, take a shot with this guy. Maybe he can bring the loan current, So they want payment relief and speed. This is what a typical Subject-To deal looks like. This is one that we did here in Arlington. It was a few years ago now, but I think this is very typical. As I looked at what they had there and asked them what they wanted, I determined that they believed they had $10,000 in equity, and and they were just trying to get that out, and they were they were behind on their loan. So I said, okay, how about this? I give you $10,000. You guys walk off sign my title, my trust documents. I'll take over the mortgage. And then bullet number 2, I'm going to pay $11,000 to bring the mortgage current because they were, a few months behind. I don't remember some fees and stuff. In this case, they had not actually received notice of default, but they knew it was coming. They were 4 or 5 months. I don't remember the months, but you could kind of do the math, and some legal fees and such. So they owed $11,000 to the mortgage company. The rehab budget on that house was $27,000. So if you add all that up, that's the cash we had to bring to do the deal and take over their mortgage. So we came in with $48K. And they walked off, they signed the documents, we began the rehab. In that period of time, we're paying the mortgage, and we paid, I believe, 4 months of that mortgage because there's a couple of months of rehab and then a couple of months of marketing and selling the property. We finally sold it 4 months about 4 months. It may have been 5, but you get the idea. You understand the math. So at 4 months, it was $53,000 of cash. So you just realize that as a real estate investor, this is not I know this is sold as this deal where I can go people will give me their house and give me their loan, and I don't have to pay them anything. And that is generally, I would say, almost always not true. So, novation deal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because honestly, I haven't, while I've done subject twos, I haven't done a lot of novations. I haven't done a novation, to be honest. I know a lot of people who have. I once interviewed Eric Brewer. I'll put that, well, no, it was a private video. Sorry. I interviewed Eric Brewer. I think he was the godfather of the novation agreement, and interviewed him a few years ago. Long before Pace Morby. I don't think those guys were talking about it. This guy, Eric Brewer, was out doing novation agreements. So I do know a little bit about it. Basically, why does this happen? It happens because this, what you're offering on your cash deal is not really meeting the seller's needs. And so it's kind of a thing to have in your back pocket that gives you like one more shot to try to make some money off this lead. And so it's, I could do this agreement with you, this novation agreement, and you basically, I'm going to sign a purchase agreement, which is bullet number 1. Number 2, we're going to sign a novation agreement. You allow me to replace the end buyer, and then I'm going to go market it, which generally implies that I've got some way to get this thing on the MLS, whether I don't know if a licensed agent should be doing this type of deal, because this is kind of feels like brokerage to me. And then, you find somebody that'll pay more. Basically, they replace the investor, and, you split basically the difference kind of. And so it's kind of complicated, but again, I think if you were explaining it to someone and you had already talked about the typical deal, the cash deal, how it works, all that kind of stuff, and they kind of said, "No, this doesn't work for me," then you would pull this out of your pocket. I don't think you would lead with this. I don't think you would lead with subject-to. These things are kind of creative deals. Novation is the best fit for somebody that has some equity. In fact, they might have quite a bit of equity, but the property needs work. They don't want to do that. They want more than a cash investor can pay them. But they're not in any sort of financial distress. They're willing to wait, and they're open to this creative structuring idea. So not everybody, when you start explaining innovation, some people's eyes are going to glaze over, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, okay, well, forget it. Never mind. Let's move on. So you maximize price without fixing the property. That's the main thing, is they want the most money they can get without fixing the property. And you're trying to solve that problem for them with the novation agreement. No, that's cool. It's cool. So subject-to, you're solving, they have a debt problem, a financing problem. In novation, there's a pricing gap problem, between what you can offer and what they want. So let's look at what's the point. Well, traditional deals are pretty well understood by everybody. And, you're going to find as you start to work with title companies or, anybody there, they're going to understand cash purchase, right? even an assignment of a deal. They're going to understand that. Most title companies will understand that. Creative deals are often, they're kind of complicated, and they're often not even understood by those people who are talking about them, and that could lead to some confusion. And you don't want to confuse the homeowner, because if they start getting confused, you're probably not doing a deal. I think new investors should stick to traditional deal structures, and even, you can add the creative tools later. Learn to do the business. And I would say learn it on both the wholesale and retail side. One of the things I kind of regret is that I never got my license. I've always worked and partnered and had licensed people in our company. And, now I run a broker licensed business called Housing Ballet also. And so I've been all around it, but I never got licensed. I think and I'm 64 now, if I was a young man or woman who was getting into this now, I would get licensed, because it gives you the retail tools as well as the wholesale tools. That's what I would do before I tried to become an expert in Subject-To or novations or things like that. I also think you should look to work with experienced investors in your market, offer to help them in some way, just so you can get close to the process. Save money, and you can become an owner of real estate. And I think that's really the goal, is to, with wealth creation, it comes from owning these assets. All these other things that we're doing, to flip them, turn them, flip them, flop them, that's kind of a job. Wholesaling's a job, all of it feels like a job. The thing that's not a job is acquiring the real estate, holding it, putting renters in there, getting cash flow, getting appreciation. That's what real estate investing is all about. And this is, I think, a final point I wanted to make about this creative stuff. I didn't want to just crap on Subject-To or Pace Morby or anything like that in this presentation, because I like Pace is a fine guy. I like Subject-To, but here's what I found in the years of doing this business myself, and in being associated with hundreds of people that have done thousands of deals. This is what we typically find. A seller comes into our funnel and they say, I want to sell my house for cash. Generally, they are just kind of looking for the easy way to sell the house. Often what they find out is that we can't, they're not distressed enough. The house is in decent shape. They're not in a hurry. Our offer doesn't satisfy them. So basically they end up going to an agent. That's why I think if you're licensed and somebody comes into your funnel and they realize, oh my, you can't pay what I want, well, then you can you can kind of move them to, well, I can list the house, and we could list it, aggressively. We could do these things, and we could try to sell it and get you more money for the property. And that is a really nice transition that you can do if you're licensed. I would do it, transition that to my agent partner, Angela. And that we had kind of a deal going on where she would send me cash deals and I would send her retail deals. But, if you could do it yourself, that'd be awesome. Of the people that are coming into our funnel, about 10% of them will sell to a cash buyer. And that the property's in rough shape and they're in a hurry to get some money for some reason, generally. And they're often sometimes facing financial distress like a foreclosure. Of the 10% who sell to cash buyers, most of them want cash for their house. I know that may surprise you. I know it doesn't. My point is this: maybe 5% of the 10% are creative deals. And so if you focus on creative deals, you're focusing on the very, very narrowest bottom part of the funnel. Of the 10% that would sell to a cash buyer, of those, maybe 5% will do a creative type of deal. You see where I'm going with that? If you can list properties, you can convert almost every lead in your funnel to money. If you can only do creative deals, you maybe can convert 1 out of 50 or more leads in your funnel to money. So it doesn't work if you just focus on the creative things. That's my point for this show today, guys. If you're looking to grow your real estate investing business, we sell leads, we sell territories, and we also work with highly qualified cash buyers in our referral business where we pre-qualify deals that we get from our partners such as realtor.com. And so 3 ways to work with you. If you'd like to learn more, reach out to Mike at 817-435-4446. Guys, it's been a real pleasure to spend some time with you today. If you have a house that you'd like to sell fast for cash, just not deal with the headaches of fixing it up, and you'd like to move along pretty quickly, you'd like to get cash and move on down the road, go to webuyhouses.com, put the address in, answer a few questions, and we will hook you up with one of the top real estate investors in your local market. We won't sell your name to a bunch of people. We'll connect you to one professional. That's what we do at webuyhouses.com. Guys, that's what I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed episode 90. I've got something special cooking up for episode 100. We got to do something cool for that. So just thanks for hanging out and being with me today. It's been a real pleasure. And I'll see you very soon. Take care. Adios.